An FBI agent bursts into a velvet-draped office, slamming a folder on the desk in front of the mayor. Photos spill out, crisp images of the mayor taking envelopes of cash from a contractor's car. "We know everything, and we know who you paid to keep it quiet." The mayor freezes. But outside that room, another man listens. Undercover. Recording. And the face behind the corruption? It's someone he once owed his life to. The file landed on Special Agent Ryan Cross's desk at 6:03 a.m. A brown envelope with no return address and no fingerprints. Inside, a single USB drive and a message typed in all caps. "Your own people are in on it." No names, no dates. Just dozens of audio clips, whispers in dark hallways, meetings behind locked doors, mentions of inflated contracts and off-the-record payments. City Hall. That was the epicenter. Somewhere inside its polished floors and gold-plated offices, someone was bleeding the public dry. Cross didn't hesitate. He activated a dormant asset, Detective Daniel Voss. Daniel had been deep undercover more times than most agents survive their first year. No family, no ties, no record in the Bureau's current system. That's how Cross liked it. He didn't need clean agents, he needed ghosts. Daniel slipped into City Hall as a mid-level procurement officer. Low enough to go unnoticed, high enough to move through departments with ease. Within days, he started noticing irregularities, contracts granted to shell companies, kickbacks laundered through bogus consulting fees, sudden wealth showing up in parking garages and staff lockers. But one name stopped him cold. Victor Hale. The name was buried in a vendor list, no fanfare, just a contractor assigned to infrastructure coordination. Daniel knew the name and the face. Years ago, Daniel had been undercover with the DEA, posing as a broker inside a narcotics ring in Arizona. The op collapsed in a violent ambush. Bullets flew, radios died, and Daniel bled out behind a stack of crates, until a man dragged him to safety, vanished before the cleanup, and was never identified again. That man was Victor. And now he was working contracts with the mayor's office. Daniel didn't tell Cross. Not yet. He needed to be sure. But his instincts screamed louder than ever. Victor wasn't just a player. He was building something. Something bigger than kickbacks and fake invoices. Each day inside City Hall pulled Daniel deeper. He'd sit in on budget meetings where numbers were massaged like press releases. He watched aides hand off flash drives in elevators, caught glimpses of briefcases with false bottoms. The corruption wasn't sloppy, it was surgical. Still, no one talked. Not on record. Not in meetings. But late one night, while posing as janitorial staff, Daniel followed an assistant down into a sub-basement used for archiving. The man opened a locked cabinet and removed a thick envelope, shoving it inside a vent. When he left, Daniel pulled it free. Inside, payment logs, names, dates, account numbers, and at the top, Victor Hale. It was real. It was massive. And it had one rule, no outside eyes. Daniel returned home that night and stared at the envelope. The man who once saved his life was at the center of a scheme that could burn the city to the ground. He picked up the burner phone Cross gave him and hesitated. He'd worn many masks in his life, but this time the stakes weren't just federal. They were personal. Victor knew who Daniel was. And worse, if Daniel moved too fast, he could lose everything. Or worse, blow the whole case before it began. The phone buzzed in his hand. A message from Cross, status update. Tomorrow 9 a.m. Daniel typed 2 words, digging deeper, and hit send. But outside, parked just across the street in a black SUV, Victor Hale sat behind tinted glass, watching, waiting, and smiling. The room was dim. Only the red recording light blinked softly in the corner, pulsing like a heartbeat. Daniel sat still, motionless, listening to the recording from earlier that day. Victor's voice was calm, measured, as if bribing city officials had become as casual as ordering lunch. Move the permits through infrastructure by Wednesday. The mayor signs Friday. No paper trail. You know the drill. Daniel paused the playback and removed the earpiece. His heart was racing, not because of the content, but because Victor had looked him straight in the eyes earlier that day, like he already knew. Victor hadn't changed much. Older, more expensive suits, but still had the same calculating gaze. His handshake lasted a second too long, his smirk just a touch too knowing. And when Daniel had introduced himself under the fake identity, Victor had only said, "Nice to see a familiar face in this building." He knew. Still, Daniel pushed forward. Every interaction now walked a line between evidence collection and self-preservation. He wired himself up every morning, praying no one found the mic beneath his collar. He walked into rooms where five-figure payments were passed around in manila folders, where contracts were signed with the stroke of a pen and the fall of a favor. Cross began asking questions. He could sense something was off in Daniel's voice. The agent who once stormed cartel strongholds without backup was now sounding hesitant, cautious. That wasn't like him. One night, Cross called. "Is there something you're not telling me?" Daniel didn't answer. Silence hung like a thread. "I need to know if we've got a leak," Cross continued. Internal affairs flagged a pattern. Files going missing. Surveillance compromised. Either someone inside City Hall is feeding intel, or we've got a problem closer to home. Daniel gritted his teeth. "I'll find the truth. Just give me space." The next day, Victor invited Daniel to a private meeting. Not at City Hall. Not at a construction site. A restaurant on the edge of town, empty except for two waiters and the quiet hum of a jazz radio in the background. Victor ordered whiskey. He didn't touch it. "You know," he said slowly, "people here think they're untouchable. Politicians, executives, even some of your people. But I've seen what happens when empires crumble." Daniel didn't respond. Victor leaned in, voice lower now. "You ever feel like you're being followed?" Daniel's heart pounded. He kept his hands steady on the table. "Because if you are," Victor continued, "you should be careful. People who wear wires don't last long in this town." A pause. "I've buried better men for less." The threat was subtle, wrapped in velvet. But it was real. Back at the safe house, Daniel peeled off his shirt. Sweat drenched the back where the recorder sat taped against his skin. He dropped it onto the table and pressed play. Victor's voice crackled back through the room. He had the evidence. Dozen new names. Confirmed accounts. Even a link between the mayor's re-election campaign and offshore wires through fake foundations. But none of it mattered if Victor was onto him. Daniel stared at the small steel box on the table, a dead man's switch, pre-wired to upload every recording he'd taken to a secure federal cloud in case he didn't make it back one day. He hadn't needed it before. Now he wasn't so sure. The next morning, Daniel walked into City Hall. The building looked different now, less majestic, more predatory. Marble floors turned into cold glass, windows into mirrors. He moved through the halls like a man already marked. Victor passed him in the corridor. "You still digging?" he asked softly. Daniel forced a smile. "Always." Victor stepped closer, voice barely audible. "Just make sure you're not the one getting buried." And with that, he disappeared through a side door. Daniel stood there, frozen. He wasn't sure anymore who was hunting who. The ballroom inside City Hall was dressed like a campaign poster. Red velvet ropes, polished floors, and a giant gold banner reading "City Infrastructure, Rebuilding the Future." But what it was really rebuilding was money, disguised as civic pride. Daniel adjusted the pen in his front pocket. The mic inside it was live. Across the room stood Victor, shaking hands with donors and mid-level city officials, guiding them like a seasoned performer. He wasn't hiding anymore. He didn't need to. At the center of the room, the mayor laughed with a city developer, both men too loud, too relaxed. Every smile Daniel saw now felt like a price tag with a hidden decimal point. The ceremony was a smokescreen. Daniel had intercepted a message the night before a special donation was being delivered through a private access door, room 411B, South Annex, 10:15 a.m. No cameras. No official use. He excused himself from the ballroom and moved through the hallway, trying to look bored and busy. City workers walked past without glancing at him. His badge still got him everywhere. That was the problem with corruption. It gave you access until it didn't. Room 411B was quiet. A single flickering light buzzed overhead. Inside, a folding table, two chairs, and a man in a maintenance uniform. On the table sat a black leather briefcase. Daniel stepped inside slowly. "You're early," the man said without looking up. "I work fast." The man stood. "You're not Garrison." Daniel reached for his phone, pretending to check a text. Change of plans. They sent me instead. The man's eyes narrowed. Daniel could hear his own pulse. You're wearing a wire. Daniel froze. The man moved fast, but Daniel moved faster. In one motion, he pinned the man's arm to the table and drove a knee into his leg, sending him down. Daniel twisted the briefcase open. Bundles of cash, neatly stacked, numbered, labeled with initials and department codes. It was the clearest proof yet. The man grunted from the floor. You have no idea who you're messing with. Daniel slipped the cash bundles into an evidence bag from his coat and left before anyone else showed. Every second he stayed increased the risk of being burned. That night, Cross called again. He was tired of the half-answers. You either trust me or pull me out, Daniel said. I don't have the luxury of trust, Cross replied. You're not just in the middle of a fraud case anymore. There are 3 federal judges whose names showed up in your audio files. This goes way beyond City Hall. Daniel didn't respond. He was thinking of Victor and of the mayor, of how calm they all were, as if the laws didn't apply anymore. Daniel had once sworn an oath, but every day in that building twisted it tighter around his throat. The next morning, Daniel walked back into City Hall and found a sealed invitation on his desk. Dinner. Private. Hosted by the mayor. Location, an exclusive property outside the city, one that didn't appear on public calendars. No +1. No press. No security. It was a message. Daniel showed it to no one. Not even Cross. Instead, he went early and planted a USB device inside the room. It would activate the moment conversation started and send encrypted data to the server back at the field office. The mayor arrived with Victor. They laughed like brothers. There were no guards. Just a table of you and too much wine. Victor raised a glass. To the final stage. The mayor nodded. Once the funding's approved, we move the money offshore. Quiet. Clean. Daniel kept his face still. His hands trembled under the table. The dinner lasted less than an hour. The final words Daniel recorded before leaving were the ones that made it clear. This city, the mayor said, is already sold. The people just haven't been told yet. Daniel walked to his car without saying a word. But he knew the house of cards had to fall soon. And when it did, it would take him with it. The old train yard on the edge of the city hadn't seen a working freight car in 20 years. Rust streaked down the walls like dried blood. The gravel crunched under Daniel's boots as he walked to the agreed location, far from surveillance, far from backup. Victor stood near a burned-out boxcar, leaning against it like he'd been there for hours. He didn't speak at first, just lit a cigarette, took a slow drag, and watched Daniel approach. I thought you'd bring Cross, Victor finally said. Daniel shook his head. He doesn't know I'm here. That's dangerous. I know. Victor dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his heel. You wired? No. Victor stepped forward, searching his eyes. You lying to me now? I was never lying. I just never told you the whole truth. They stood in silence as a gust of wind howled through the empty yard. The city's skyline blinked faintly in the distance, oblivious to the storm building here. I covered for you once, Victor said. Back in Phoenix. That deal was supposed to go bad. You were the reason it didn't. Daniel nodded slowly. And you took the hit. Sealed file. No trial. Just vanished. You ever wonder why I did that? I figured you were trying to do one good thing before disappearing. Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. I did it because I believed in something. Or someone. Daniel lowered his eyes. Then why sell this place out? Victor's jaw tensed. You think I'm the only one? This city eats men like us alive. It doesn't care about your oath. It doesn't care what you sacrificed. It rewards power, not principle. I still believe in the badge. Victor stepped closer, almost whispering now. Then you're a fool. The mayor, the judges, the funders, they all know the game. You're just a pawn trying to play chess with kings. Daniel pulled something from his coat pocket. Flash drive. It's all here. Every conversation. Every bank account. I'm handing it in. Victor's eyes darkened. You do that, and I'm done. You understand me? There's no coming back. Not for either of us. Daniel raised his voice. There's nothing to come back to. Victor's expression shifted. For the first time, something real flickered behind his eyes. Regret. Maybe even sorrow. I never wanted to burn you, he said. You were the only one who played it straight. You burned this city instead. Victor looked away, then back again. You walking away now? Or are you pulling the trigger? Daniel's hand hovered near the small pistol tucked beneath his coat. For one terrible second, the past and present blurred. The man who had once saved his life was now standing on the edge of destroying everything he'd sworn to protect. He pulled the gun but didn't raise it. Just held it low, heavy in his grip. I don't want this, he said. But you came anyway, Victor replied. Neither moved. Then Victor reached into his jacket slowly, pulled out a worn photo. Folded. Well, it was from that op in Arizona. Daniel and Victor, side by side, alive after the ambush, barely 25. I kept it, Victor said. Daniel took the photo and didn't look at it. You're going to disappear after this, aren't you? Victor nodded. The money's already in motion. The mayor thinks he's buying freedom. I'm buying silence. You won't get far. I always do. Victor turned to leave, his back exposed. Daniel stood with the gun still in his hand, every muscle tense. But he didn't raise it. He let him walk. When Daniel returned to the field office, Cross was waiting in the briefing room. He'd already seen the digital copies, already heard the recordings, already knew what Daniel had done and hadn't done. You should have brought him in. Daniel set the flash drive down. I couldn't. Why? Because he's the only reason I'm still alive. Cross studied him for a long time. Your badge is on the desk, he finally said. Daniel didn't argue. He just walked to the desk, laid the badge down, and left without another word. Outside, the wind picked up again. The storm hadn't passed. It had only just begun. The federal courthouse overflowed with reporters. Dozens of microphones lined the stone steps, all pointed at the sealed wooden doors behind which one of the city's most powerful men was about to be exposed. What no one knew yet was how deep the rot went. Inside the FBI's field office, Cross reviewed the final briefing. Everything was in place. Surveillance teams embedded. The press was invited for optics. The mayor thought it was a routine public event. The trap was set. He clicked on the final file, the full digital ledger Daniel had provided. Victor's codebook, decrypted and cross-referenced. It didn't just contain names. It showed movement. Every bribe, every payoff. And at the center, connections to offshore accounts spanning 3 continents. But Victor was still free. Daniel had disappeared after dropping off the evidence. No forwarding address. No contact. His badge remained untouched on the desk where he left it. He hadn't been seen in 2 days. Cross didn't blame him. He'd made a choice few men could live with. The mayor arrived at the courthouse in a black SUV. He smiled, waved to cameras. His campaign manager walked 2 steps behind him, unknowingly carrying a folder stuffed with faked budget numbers. They entered the courtroom. Moments later, the back door opened, and 5 federal agents walked in. Quietly, calmly. Cross was among them. He waited until the mayor was seated and the cameras had started rolling. He stepped forward, placed a hand on the man's shoulder, and spoke just loud enough for everyone to hear. You're under arrest. Gasps filled the room. Papers flew. The mayor stood frozen as cuffs clicked around his wrists. Simultaneously, agents across the city raided 6 properties. The comptroller, 2 deputy mayors, 3 contractors, each taken without resistance. Each stunned that the system they built could be dismantled so precisely. But Victor wasn't among them. That same afternoon, Cross got the call. A shootout near the port yards. A suspect fleeing federal marshals. 1 wounded. 1 down. The suspect had taken a bullet but was still breathing. Victor Hale. Cross arrived minutes later. Rain started falling as paramedics wheeled Victor into an ambulance. His shirt was soaked in blood, but his eyes were open. Calm. A smirk traced the edge of his mouth as he saw Cross. You got your city back, Victor rasped. Don't waste it. Then he passed out. He'd survive. In custody. Indicted. Likely never free again. But the cost hadn't been numbers on a page. It had been Daniel. The man who tore the whole thing down and then walked away from everything. A week passed. The news exploded. Corruption, arrests, betrayal. Judges recused. Officials disgraced. The city began clawing its way toward recovery. Cross sat in his office, reviewing footage of the final press conference. Cameras clicked, reporters shouted, and behind it all, the mayor stared blankly, his career in ruins. Cross turned off the screen. He opened a drawer. Inside was Daniel's badge. Untouched. Heavy. He stared at it for a long time. That night, outside the city, in a quiet mountain town 3 hours away, a man sat at a counter in an empty diner. No phone. No ID. Just a coffee and silence. He watched the snowfall. Watched the people live their lives. For the first time in years, he wasn't pretending to be someone else. Daniel Voss had disappeared into the silence he'd earned. But back in the city he'd helped save, his shadow still moved through every corridor of justice. And in the Bureau's closed case archives, beneath a stamped file marked City Hall bribery/classified, internal one final note had been typed and sealed. Operative terminated field service voluntarily. Mission success. Loss of asset justified. Justice was served. But ghosts don't get parades. They get forgotten. And sometimes that's the only way they ever find peace.